display of and signage for beer in the off-premise beer retailers, so your grocery stores, convenience stores, and all of that. I've also created a kind of a one-pager to summarize those, which I'd be happy to send out after this meeting. When I was going through this to prepare this for Doug, in my head it felt really simple, but as I was digging through some of the language for our administrative rules, it can get a little bit tricky and complicated. Therefore, what I've tried to do is just simplify it as much as possible. So for introduction, I just wanted to remind everyone about the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. I know that Art will be talking later today more about the spirit of the law and the reasons behind it, but I think it's very important to kind of have a little bit in mind as I go through the letter of the law. So what is the spirit of the law? Down to its basics, it's to clearly and unambiguously convey to a consumer that the beverage products being sold contain alcohol. So why is this important now more than ever? So we're seeing in the grocery stores a resurgence of these non-traditional beers. They've been reformulated so that they no longer are considered an FMB or flavored malt beverage under Utah law. If you recall, back in, I think it was 2009, there was a big push to get these out of the grocery stores. There's a very specific definition for an FMB that was targeted these products. These companies have been able to formulate in a different way so that these products no longer contain any sort of distilled spirits in their alcohol flavoring. They are a malted base, so they're still considered a beer. And right now, the Utah Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, the only control that we have over these are through label approval. So on our end, we do make sure that every single product that goes into the grocery stores has sufficient labeling to give notice to the public that there's alcohol in it. That's the one thing we have control over. Beyond that, what the stores do once it gets to their stores is up to the local communities.
Yeah.
Are there any questions about some of the background before I get into the nitty-gritty of the statute?
I need to know these things.
Okay. So the letter of the law comes from statute and commission rule. So statute is promulgated by the Utah legislature, and then they give some authority to the DABC commission to further define terms. So when you, and it has the effect of law. So when you're looking at how these requirements are for off-premise beer retailers, you have to look at both 32B7-202, which outlines general operational requirements for off-premise beer retailers, specifically Section 5. Also, we have a commission rule, R81-10-1, which describes in further detail separation of alcoholic beverages from non-alcoholic beverages and required signage. So there's two things that really need to happen once the beer gets to a grocery store or convenience store. Alcohol has to be displayed in a visibly distinct area, and there also has to be appropriate signage. So first I want to talk about the visibly distinct area. So our statutes say that an off-premise beer retailer shall display beer in an area that is visibly separate and distinct from an area where non-alcoholic beverages are displayed. So what does that mean? The Utah legislature has asked that our DABC commission define that. So no commingling or intersection of beer products with non-alcoholic beverages, and must clearly and unambiguously convey to a consumer those beverage products that contain alcohol and those that do not. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Are there questions?
Hi, this is Mercy, and I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
There's some feedback. I think people don't have their phones muted or something, because when you're talking, I hear other people talking. So I'm not sure if they can check that.
So just a reminder, if you could please mute your microphone so that we're not hearing the background noise. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. If everyone could just keep them muted, and I'll try and stop periodically for questions That way you can unmute them and ask questions. Every time I hear a voice, I think someone is asking a question. Okay, so I'm going to go back. So visibly distinct area. The DABC Commission has defined that as no commingling or intersection of beer products with non-alcoholic products, and must be clearly and unambiguously conveyed to a consumer that those beverage products that contain alcohol and those that do not. Further, it says that you can meet these requirements by having either one, an entire display area dedicated to products, and it outlines cabinets, coolers, shelves, aisles, end caps, side stacks, or standalone floor displays, or a room. This is probably the easiest way to comply. It's also an area that I think that our DABC Commission is looking at redefining so that we can clarify some things, I think specifically to end caps. The second way is having a shared display area. So if you think about maybe 7-Eleven, a shared display area where beer products are displayed separately from a non-alcoholic product by way of a physical barrier or visible divider of sufficient prominence to create a clear divide between the beer products and the non-alcoholic beverages. So when we look at that, if you've got one cooler that's very large in the entire back of the wall at, say, 7-Eleven, they have that shared cooler, but they are required to have in one cooler area all of the beer products and then have a clear divide between those products and non-alcoholic beverages. So that's the first part of what the stores are supposed to be doing for creating a separate area for the beer or for the alcoholic products. The second requirement is signage. So both have to happen. You have to have first the separate area, and then you have to have signage. The area described above must contain signage that clearly and unambiguously conveys to a consumer that the beverage product displayed in that area contain alcohol. So signage, how do they comply? So there's the boring part of it. They have to be prominently posted in an area where beer is sold, easily readable, which means in print that is no smaller than 5 inches, bold type, on a solid contrasting background, larger than 8.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So making the sign, I know that a lot of our beer wholesalers have worked really hard to create signs to give to their off-premise accounts because they understand the importance of having these signs available. And so I think it's easy for a lot of the retailers to meet these requirements for what the signs must contain because they can obtain them from the wholesaler. The other question is one sign always enough? The answer to that is no. Additional signs may be necessary depending on the size and type of the display area. So this is an example of your local grocery store that may have an entire aisle devoted to beer. It's not sufficient to have one sign at the very beginning or one sign in the middle. There needs to be sufficient signage across that entire aisle to give the public notice that every single thing in that aisle contains alcohol. So then just a reminder for the off-premise retailers when they ask, well, why should we comply with this? Well, first of all, it's the public policy of the state of Utah and it's promulgated into law. And if that's not enough, failure to comply is considered a crime and suspension or revocation of local licensing. So that is my quick overview of the laws related to display of beer in off-premise grocery stores, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. So Logan, do you have any questions that you wanted me to answer or any specific areas that I didn't cover that you'd like me to talk about?
No, I think this has been great so far.
Okay.
This is Craig. I have a question. Are you there?
Yes.
I think I heard you say that the enforcement of this is up to the local law enforcement. Is that true?
That is true.
So as a consumer or coalition member, if I walk into a store that ignores requests from the coalition to do adequate and unambiguous signage, the next step would be our police department. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then another question I have is that
Craig,
what?
Craig, this is Art.
What?
This is Art Brown. I wanted to just add to that response and question. The way that is a good way to approach this is to, go see the store manager, which I've done, and they've immediately complied. But the next step, I think, that you might not want to leave out is going to the mayor and the city council. And the chief of police works for the city council or the county council and the sheriff, and tell them your needs and why, and then they can fully understand and help the retailers themselves comply. So I just didn't want to leave out that step on the way to the police enforcement, because that's always a choice, but sometimes you can get a lot out of the mayor and the city council.
Thank you, Art. I think that's also, when I look back at why comply, so it is a crime, but in addition to that, the local authorities, so the business license office is in charge of local licensing, and failure to comply can result in suspension and or revocation. So if it is really becoming a problem and they're not complying, then I think Art is right. That is an important step in addition to going to local law enforcement.
The other question I had, and thank you for that, that makes a lot of sense. The other question I have is, I've noticed a lot of the 6-packs of these Alka-Pops, some of them have little stickers on them that says contains alcohol, and some of them don't. Can you explain what that's all about?
So that is something that is under our control, and we can take administrative action against the wholesalers and the manufacturer, because a lot of those products we are requiring that they give sufficient notice to the public that they contain alcohol. And there's right now the statute, it allows them to meet the requirements by having words such as ale or beer or other terms on their product, but we're looking at them now and going through rulemaking to have stricter requirements, because we have products now that are hard root beer. So they contain the word beer on it, but when you look at it, it doesn't by itself give you notice that it has alcohol. So we're requiring additional labeling for those products. If they're not complying with the stickering or with the labeling, we would, if you would let us know, we can take administrative enforcement to make sure that happens.
Thank you very much for that. I am really concerned because of the end caps, is the example I have in our grocery store, local grocery store. And I'm not kidding you, I walked by 3 end caps. All of them contained either beer or ale in the product name. 2 of them had alcohol and 1 of them didn't, and there's no sign. So I can buy apple beer with no alcohol, or I can buy ginger ale with no alcohol, but if I get into red apple beer, or whatever it is, now we're talking a different thing. So anyway, thank you very much for that. And everybody on the call, I would say just be really aware of that sometimes these products look just like, the products that don't have alcohol in them. And I think that we need to be a little vigilant on that.
Well, and I just wanted to clarify that the end cap issue has many layers of problems, because so the first thing is that right now I know that our commission is looking at our administrative rule that defines the separate area to include end caps, and excluding that so that it would get rid of the problem. The second thing with the end caps is that if they're mixing alcohol products with non-alcoholic products, that's a violation that needs to be brought to the city and to local law enforcement. But if the labeling on the product is not sufficient to give notice that it's alcohol, then please let me know and we'll take care of it on our end at DABC.
This is Art. Also, let me say this. When I walk into a store, my local Smith's, I asked for the manager. They had a whole bunch of end cap stuff up front. And I said, hey, listen, I am concerned. I told them who I was, and I was a customer, and I told them these got to have signs, and or you're going to be subject to violations. And he immediately called the assistant manager over. They went and got signs, and about every foot they had a sign up there. So a lot of times I think it falls into neglect because we don't enforce it on a regular basis like we do the EASY program. But a lot of times if you nicely approach the manager on some of these issues, I think that's the first place to go, and you might get immediate response, which I did out of Smith. And further, they said, we're taking all alcohol products out of the front of the store and putting them somewhere behind the cash register. They'll no longer be there. So I think give the manager a shot, you might get immediate results. That's all for me.
If there's no other questions, then I would say thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about Utah liquor laws. It's always fun for me to do that. It's what I do every day. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and we'll leave it on to Art.
Thanks very much, Nina, and everybody. And I must say this, I really appreciate everybody's awareness and the prevention and the coalition work. And if we're concerned about, and you're concerned about a community where the end caps and the stuff stashed under the vegetable counter and all those kinds of things, don't be hesitant to raise the concerns as a group. And if we want them all in one place in a grocery store and not stuffed all over, I'm sure that Nina would be willing to hear that, and we could go other places too, and if there's additional legislation needed, Nina could point us that way if she can't take care of it under her authorization, because it's really clear in the law, and Nina, correct me, that you have to be able to tell the difference between an alcohol product and a non-alcohol product under law. Is that right, Nina?
That is correct.
Yeah. So if you don't feel we're getting what you need, Craig, or any coalition member, don't sit back, because that's not right that people pick up one product when they think they're getting another. Okay, let me turn to my presentation. And Rob, do you want to say anything in the way of introductions, or you or Logan, since you invited me?
Art, I'm happy to. This is Rob. We asked Art to come on and talk about some of the, with Nina giving us some background on Utah laws, we wanted Art to kind of give the other side of the story of how and why we have these laws in Utah, and the positive effect that they have as a comprehensive effort for preventing underage drinking in the state of Utah, and also preventing overconsumption and dangerous drinking by those that can drink legally. There's kind of, we've got these great laws. Oftentimes they're the envy of other states around the country, but why do we have these laws, and how are they actually working and helping those two populations, our underage drinking populations and those that may overconsume. So Art's a great friend. He's been doing alcohol policy for a long time in the state of Utah, is in many ways part of the founding team of the Parents Empowered campaign, as well as the Eliminating Alcohol Sales to Youth legislation in the states within state policy. So we're just extremely happy to have Art on. He knows probably everything and more about alcohol, and probably more than he'd ever set out to know in the first place. So thanks, Art, and look forward to learning again from you.
Thanks, but you're much too kind. Everything you do in the alcohol world is done as a team, and I got foisted into this business, but Nina's in it way ahead of us, and she's really knowledgeable, so she can correct me if I go along here, and we appreciate your work. And I had a bunch of handouts sent out, and I hope you can turn to the first one, and let's just quickly go through so I have time for questions that you might want to ask. It's red and white. Do you all have it in front of you? We okay there? It says state alcohol control policies and alcohol impaired driving in the United States. This is something that's done by the oh good, thanks, it's up on the screen. It needs rotated though, but maybe you can't rotate it. But this was done by people at the Minnesota Public School of Health and Boston School of Health up that way. And it compares the laws with all of the alcohol-impaired driving in the United States. And if you'll notice on the graphs, only a couple things, you can examine this, but if you'll notice on all of the graphs, Utah is out at the right. We're an outlier. We're clear at the end of this. And this is really good stuff, because if you also notice down on the discussion box, and then I'm going to leave this thing for you to look over, but it really says, which is really important, a stronger state-level alcohol policy environment is associated with decreased likelihood of alcohol-impaired driving. And, you know, you have your general alcohol control policies, but what really drives this is an understanding of the total, what they're saying here is our total set of laws as a totality really is a thing that helps sets us apart. And I think that's really true. We really have a nice package of laws, and you can see it isolates really out here as they compare these laws, and it's just not all culture. And I asked the author about that because, you know, you get this Mormon stuff and that we do in cultures, but he said, you know, that's part of the culture. You got a culture enough to have the laws. And even if we had, like I say, if you want to do away with all these laws, you'd have some pretty poor behavior on the streets and so forth. So this is a very good document that shows that our laws have been effective and have contributed substantially because of their completeness and their seriousness of which the legislature thinks about this. Okay, down to the next one. If somebody could do that, it's running, and I'm not running my computer. Logan, can you do the next one? Who's ever got the control of that? The next handout I have is that this is a very important one in the sense that Jim Feld did a study of all of the 20 laws, the OJJDP, Office of Juvenile Justice. They list 20 laws, which are listed across the top, that you should have to help with underage drinking. And they list every state, and they examine them and to what's effective and how effective they are in the implementation. And if you go down here to Utah on the left side, clear down to Utah and all the way across, we're the only state, by the way, that has all 20 laws with a 0.85 implementation effectiveness. And that's really a credit to everybody that's gone before us and to everybody that's aware. And I can tell you, I know Nina can verify this, the ABC is really really conscious of the underage drinking that goes on that shouldn't go on, and really give us a lot of help. So that's something to be kept in mind when we decide, well, do we have effective laws and do they make a difference? And here are people outside of us saying, yes, they do make a difference. So let me just stop and ask, are there any questions on that at all? Okay, hearing none. Logan, if you need a clean PDF of the red sheet, let me know, and I can email you one if somebody wants to print it off and use it. Now, the other thing that I think really makes a difference in a lot of our alcohol policies is one area, and that's youth exposure to alcohol. So if I could go up to the next slide, the next thing. I found this document very, very important in the underage drinking world. You can go on the web and just Google it. It's Alcohol Alert number 67. And if you go to the next little thing, yeah. Let's see, the next sheet. Yeah, the next sheet. Next little thing right there. Yeah, on here is a very nice set. Everybody's always asking about research. Oh, no, back down one to the second page of that. On the second page, yeah, back down to the Alcohol Alert. I'll show you something very important. Yes, thank you. On the left-hand side, you see expectancies there. This is a very important paragraph in my mind, and I won't take time to read it because it grinds up time. But in it basically says, you know, up to 9, people don't give a hoot about alcohol, but from 9 to 13, they're making up their mind about should they try this stuff or not and get involved. And you read this is that they think it's pleasurable, and that's the way they view it in their environment. It's a high likelihood that they're going to try it. And the more pleasurable they view it, the more likely they are they're going to try it. And we know this starts early because, you know, our own Sharp survey shows that binge drinking shows up at least by the 6th grade, which is rather horrifying, but 90% of the alcohol CDC tells us that's drunk by kids is in binge drinking mode. But the important point that I like to emphasize with people is the gray box next now. It says treatment and unmet need. This is extraordinarily important in my mind because when you do it, you find out that only 84% of the kids will never get their treatment needs met, those who need treatment. When they get into alcohol, as you know, it could go very fast for a young kid, and they can get dependent on it on different levels. And so 16% get it, and I've checked that out with Utah data a few years ago, and that's probably a good number too. But the question to really ask, what happens to these people? And this is why our prevention work is so important. And I've been in front of committee meetings, and I said, what do you expect to do with these people? Where do you expect them to go? What kind of quality of life do you want? And it isn't that treatment doesn't work. It's that they don't necessarily, as you see down here, there's lots of reasons people won't do treatment. It doesn't fit in, they don't have the time, they don't want to be singled out. You go down the list, but nonetheless, they're down this road, and it really makes it difficult to back these kids out when they get to this level. So that's why the 021 laws are extraordinarily important and in our society, because it's not only saved a lot of lives, like over 25,000 lives, but you know, your quality of life is not going to be so good. So if we could go to the next slide, and I'm just going to go through these as quickly as I can and then tell you why I use them, and why they're effective. The next thing, let's see. Okay, one before the break. Yeah, right there. Now this addiction slide you all know about, but don't assume everyone else knows about. And I'll just tell you that these 2 slides have been important for me for the last 10 plus years, because for people who give out money at the legislature and pass laws, this is a new chart to them. And you know, if you ask somebody if they start early, which they do, what's the percentage of do you think that it's going to be an alcoholic? And you can see it's pretty high, and they're going to really roll over to hard drugs 67% of the time when they're trying it before 15. So don't assume everybody knows this, because it's an alarming number. And let's go to the next one, if you could. And the next little handout. The next one is really an important one also that's not realized by people. And this is Dr. Susan Tabert's work out of San Diego that I've used over the years, because, and you might have seen this, but because people don't understand, the one on the left is a 15-year-old non-drinker in this test, and you can see his brain light up. The one on the right is a 15-year-old male heavy drinker, and you don't see much activity in the brain on this particular task under this functional MRI. But the important point of this thing is, this is while the 15-year-old male is sober. This is during the week, sober. So you can see that the action on the brain is not so good. And the reason why that these slides remain important is because people continue to treat a can of beer like a non-alcoholic root beer. And it's important to keep the harms, which are much longer than just brain development and addiction, in front of our mayors and councils and our communities, because we're really dumbing down a lot of kids when they go down the alcohol path, and it's important that people understand that. So let me go on to the next one for a moment, because this is not well understood either. The next slide, if I could. And okay, now the next piece of data is coming. I just put this in there so you'd have a reference. If we could go to the next one, if you could. And the real issue here is that's rarely ever talked about is, I say to people, well, how many people do you think drink in Utah? And they don't know. And they don't know how early or how many. And this is an important piece. And the reason I use this and not SHARP, SHARP only goes through high school, as you know, takes in every other year. But this is a profile from SAMHSA, so you know it's close, but it's okay. So I always use the 30-day alcohol use, because I think that's more reflective of probably what's going on. But you see in Utah, that's 57,000 people who've been drinking in the last month in Utah. Now that's not a trivia number. I mean, that would overflow the Ute Stadium and just come under the BYU Stadium. That is a lot of people. And when I have a graphic, I usually show them a stadium full of people. Well, it turns out that that's important, because you have to realize you're not going to arrest or treat your way out of this problem. It's not going to be done. And what's happening is that a lot of kids are having the development of their brains impacted and exposed to addiction, and plus all other things impacts suicides, death, and it's the leading cause of death. And so these are really big numbers that we have to stay on top of prevention with, because people, and you need to let them know how many, it's good to know how many, not just percents. I can tell you percents don't mean a lot to people as much as the absolute quantity that are drinking in your particular area. And when they see these numbers, they're rather surprised, because we only arrest a fraction of them a year. I mean DUIs, you can go to the next slide. DUIs, the catch rate is only 1.5% a night, and they know that, so they can get away with it. That's why they drive, and that's why we have a hard time. Now, this is why your work is really important, or our prevention work is important. And this one is a child who gets through age 21 without smoking, abusing alcohol, or using illegal drugs is virtually certain never to do so. You can go to the next slide while I talk about this one. This is really what I call a connect the dots slide. And when people are talking about filling these prison beds and all this stuff, and they go out there and they say, well, it's alcohol and drugs, and I ask them, where do you think it starts? And it starts really in the big pushes in adolescence. And you realize some of these adolescents do have mental issues, and there's all kinds of things that contribute to it. But really, the drug and alcohol problems that roll forward are really, really born out of early initiation and heavy use, really, of alcohol and then drugs and whatever. And it's important that the policymakers and the communities understand that, because that's why they need to continue to invest in prevention and our zero tolerance policies, because once a kid goes down this road, boy, they're hard to get off. And we've all known them, we've seen them in our families, and most of us been touched by some sort of drugs in our families, and it really is tough. So these are two quotes that surprise people, because a lot of people think, well, you know, it takes on a little bit longer in life. So, okay, so let's go to the next one. And let me show you another set of research that's really important to us. And I only have 5 minutes, so I'm not going to get through all this, but that's all right. And that is that the CDC has gotten together a community task force on excessive alcohol use. And they've looked at all the research, and that's really important that they've looked at it all, and they've came up with certain recommendations. And one of them is on alcohol density. You can go to the next one. And this is one thing that a control state, go to the next visual aid. The next is really important, Because at the top of the list, if you have to control stuff, you got to control alcohol density. That's at the pinnacle of the fight, so to speak. Youth exposure of alcohol, taxes, and but if you one thing you need to get is, everybody needs to get, additional availability brings additional social debris behind it. And it's more than 1 for 1. Alcohol never pays its way, and they have exact numbers on that. But you want to really control the alcohol density of the products, and that's why you see a lot of resistance. That's why we haven't upped the bar quota at all for a long time, and that's why we have quotas on various things and to control the alcohol density. That's why a lot of us are reluctant to move wine and heavy beer to the grocery stores and the other DCA products that people want, because you'll go from 44 DABC stores and 100 other outlets to 1,500, 2,000 stores, and it drives itself. So really, an outlet, just keep in mind, is important, because it not only satisfies demand, it drives demand. It drives excessive demand. And that's why it's important to control the alcohol density, because it drives excessive demand way up. And so you might want to look at that. And the other thing is, the next one I want to show you real quick, and then I'm going to stop. My time will be up. The next thing that we have, this is a little policy brief that I picked up and was given, where in California they've lost complete legislative control over, and do the next one if you want, the next one too, of their alcohol license control, complete control of it. So they're having these restaurants morph into bars, and so they can't control what they do. And you'll see the first paragraph up there, that's exactly what that's the strategy, is a reference to morph into bars. They want to amp it up. Well, let me just say, there's a lot of us that have said, hey, wait a minute, when I came back on the scene in 2009, 8, and 7, what do we got kids at bars for? And it turns out we did have kids at bars, because we had bars in restaurants, and we had kids at the bars. And in 2009, that's when the compromise was made that we decide restaurants would be restaurants and bars are going to be bars. And it's none like Wyoming. They got restaurants to restaurant license, and they have in their code that they can't morph into bars. Well, that comes back to what I read in Alcohol 67 in my mind, where the more pleasurable they're going to view these environments that alcohol is, the more apt they are to do it. So that's where some of this laws that we have come in, and what they come out of, and exactly why they do them. The last thing I wanted to do, and Nina, is go to the very last slide, I think. I'll skip the rest, because Nina may want to come. This is the mission statement of DABC, and it's what is in code. And this is what everybody's bound by. And it starts out, which I think is really great. We are not going to saturate. If you look at this, it's their responsibility to make alcohol. You have to reasonably satisfy the public demand while you protect the public interest. So there's two sides of the coin in Utah under law, that we have to reasonably satisfy the demands for the product, but we got to have an eye on the public interest too. And so that's the laws that we try and operate under. And as you can see, the research shows that a lot of what we've done and a lot of the laws we've embraced are the ones that are recommended, and our control state has brought less misery from alcohol, including death and addiction and everything else. So with that, I'm going to quit. And Nina, you want to comment on your mission statement, and then I'm getting off. If you want to comment, and then we'll open it up to turn it back to Logan. Or
Sure, thanks, Art. That was great. It's always good to hear and be reminded of why we do what we do. The mission statement of the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control is obviously to conduct, license, and regulate the sale of alcoholic products in a manner and prices. So it's, you know, we as a control state set the prices for all of the alcoholic products, and it's across the board. So for anything for wine, and spirits and heavy beer, if you buy it at any outlet across the state, whether it be in Springdale or Moab or Logan or Salt Lake, you're going to get the same price no matter where you are. And I think that helps kind of drive the prices. It's also got a sufficient markup that isn't prohibitive, but also will help kind of make it not have any discounted prices and encourage people to buy more than they intended. The other thing is reasonably satisfy public demand and protect the public interest. And it's not just people who want to drink, but people who don't want to drink. And I think with having, you know, we've got, with the liquor stores, we have 44, and I know that right now we have received some recommendations on where to expand. There's 2 that are being built right now, and probably a couple in the future, but all of that is based on on a lot of different data based on where is the growth happening and where is their need, and just due to the fact that our current stores are just overly crowded. So, I mean, I think it's always good to go back to our mission statement and remember that as licensees come in to apply, that yes, we're there to make sure that there is adequate alcohol service in the state of Utah, but also to make sure that it's not overly saturated. So I don't know. If you have any questions for me or for Art, I think we'd be happy to answer them. This has been fun having Art and I together. I think that we would like to do this more often.
Yeah. Logan, we'll turn it back to you.
Thanks to both of you. Are there any questions for either Art or Nina?
Yeah, I've got a question. This is Doug Murakami. Hey, first of all, thanks Art and Nina for putting this on, and just wanted to compliment the UPCA for really looking at or examining our existing liquor laws and making sure that people are complying with them and looking at those environmental approaches and strategies for the solutions. Nina, I got an email just this morning from Utah County questioning about, is there a way we can get them a all-inclusive list of all of the flavored malt beverages sold in Utah? I think there's a lot of confusion out there. I mean, there's so many different brands and labels and whatnot. Any thoughts? Is that a Jim Olson thing that we could go to and see about getting a list for these folks? I think that might be helpful. I'm not sure what others think, but special request from Utah County to maybe provide them with a list.
Thanks, Doug. I think, well, first of all, so we have, Stephanie does all of the label approvals, and we've started creating a spreadsheet over a year ago to track every product that's been approved for label approval, both in grocery stores as well as in the state liquor stores. The problem, we could certainly provide that extensive list. The problem is that if it's an FMB under Utah law, it's going to be in the state liquor store, and I think Utah County might be more interested in wanting to know what these non-traditional products are that have reformulated. So your Red's Apple Ale and your, you know, the Mike's Hard Lemonade and the hard root beers and all of that. So if I could get more clarification on what exactly they're looking for, we'd be happy to provide any information we have.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Nina. Let's. I think that might be helpful for everyone out there, as well as Utah County, just to take a look at that list, or even if we had some labels that we could look at. That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. Doug, I'm also collecting kind of interesting labels in a file. Maybe tomorrow when I'm in the office, I can go over them with you and we can see what we can pull together.
Sounds great.
And this is Art, I'll just add this. If you don't think something's labeled out there that can be clearly distinguished between non-alcoholic or alcoholic, I would definitely send send an email note to Nina, because she has to approve all these labels to make sure that they are clearly distinguishable. Is that right, Nina?
That's correct. So we're approving them, but if they're not complying, we need to know about that.
And I'll tell you, sometimes I've gone into the liquor stores and they don't have the stickers on them that they do need on the FMBs under law, and I mentioned it to the department, and they've hopped right on it. So, yeah, I think everybody's in tune with compliance, and we need additional laws or rules. We need to speak up.
This is Craig. I have two other, maybe a comment or question or whatever, but I'm wondering if there's somehow UPCA, the division, and the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, if we could maybe pull together all this information in a way that we can continue to refer back to it, and especially our coalitions. I'm putting in a plug, if you can see that online, to get Art and Nina down to the Summer Summit, because I think this is just so valuable and people need to know it. But I also know well enough that because of turnover and just because there's so much to this, it would be really cool to be able to go to, whether it's a website or know exactly who to contact to keep abreast of the, you know, the alcohol, not just the laws, but the rules that go along with it. And the next thing, Nina, this is, I have no idea if you would know this or not, but I was approached by a lawmaker who actually is a law enforcement guy himself, and he was asking me about what kind of rules and laws are there governing what is considered the non-alcoholic, like the O'Douls and the Cutters and near beer, whatever you may call it. Do you guys have anything to do with that, or the labeling of that, and what exactly does it mean that less than 0.05% or whatever that says?
So if it's not, if it doesn't meet the definition of an alcoholic product, then it isn't required to go through DABC. They are allowed to display those products with other alcoholic products, but beyond that, we don't have anything to do with them.
Okay, so that tells me that they don't meet the requirement of alcohol, even though they don't promise there's none in there. They say it contains less than a certain, I don't know, 0.5%
I think
or
it's
something.
0.05%. If a product contains less than 0.05%, it's not considered an alcoholic product and therefore not regulated by the DABC.
Okay. And then I guess I know that this would then be out of your purview, but it just stands to reason then that they would not be required to show ID, et cetera, things like that.
Right. There's currently no requirements that they show ID, so I don't know how it's being handled in the store. We have been getting that question a lot.
Okay. And then to that other point, I'm wondering if others might be willing to join in on an effort, or maybe that's already done, about, you know, a one-stop shop for the laws and rules.
I'd be happy to collaborate in any way that we can. I think that getting more information out to people, the better.
I will say this, Craig. I will forward to you all the 20 laws for underage drinking and the research that was done on it and all of that, because that's all well packaged, and it might be worthwhile for somebody to have that for distribution.
And I created a one-pager as part of, when I was creating this presentation, I did create a little one-pager that I think would be helpful to give out to grocery stores. I see that Leanne has posted something about like a document that we could get out to the different grocery stores, and we would have that. I think that might be something we could even work with the wholesalers, because I know that one of the questions the wholesalers say is that they'll drop off the product and give them the signs, and then the grocery store might move things around. Maybe they could hand those out when they're dropping off product.
I think that'd be very helpful. Go ahead, Art.
Excuse me. On the signage problem, I'm not saying under the pumpkin patch, but on the signage problem, we would probably get as much compliance out of a store visits first, and then to the community council and business licensing. I think that they would, you'll find, at least the stores I've been in, and I don't mind just chatting with them, and they say, hey, I'll get right on it. We would get a long way, and you could do that immediately. You wouldn't have to wait for anything to ramp up, and that's one way to start on that. And the other way I would say, too, Logan, I want to say this, too, gave a great thing on easy down at the conference, and that needs to be repeated because we also need to do compliance checks out at the retail stores. They're fully funded. There's training programs, and that sends a notice to the community. You better, if you don't do compliance checks, the liquor's going, the alcohol's going out. Don't worry, but you need to do that to set a community norm. And the heavyweight stuff, the bars and the heavyweight restaurants, are being taken care of by the 19-person alcohol enforcement team, and all of those referrals come into NENA. So, but we do need to make sure the retail stores are, which the local law enforcement has. So Logan did a great job on that, and that probably needs to be reemphasized too. Thanks.
Thank you, Art. Nina, any handouts like that one that you mentioned, if you want to send that to me, I'll post it on the website so that everybody on the call can have easy access to it. I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, again, we just want to thank Art and Nina both for giving up an hour of their afternoon to come and talk to us. It's been recommended that we bring them back where we can spend more time on this topic, so we will definitely look at that as an option for the Coalition Summit in June. And also, just so that you're aware, this was meant to be kind of a first step presentation to understand more about the laws and why they exist. And in one of our webinars in the coming year, probably early on, either February or March, we're going to be doing another presentation on how we can take this information and have some specific activities that coalitions can engage in to assess what's happening in their community in relation to these laws, and then to address them through various means, including those that Art has mentioned with simply talking to our retailers about the issue. So look forward to that in the next 2 months. We'll continue this conversation and talk about specific things that coalitions can do. In the meantime, this presentation will be posted on our website later this afternoon. So if you go to utahprevention.org and click on Trainings 2016, you'll be able to access a recording of the presentation as well as all of Art's handouts and any others that we post this afternoon. They'll all be available on that website. If you're interested in the next session of the DFC series, that will be tomorrow at noon using the same login link or telephone number. We look forward to seeing many of you there. Otherwise, we hope to see you back here next month at our January meeting, which will be on January 18th, and we'll be reviewing some of the upcoming legislation the coalitions are going to be interested in. Everybody have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and we'll see you in January. Thanks, and have a good day.